So I recently had the pleasure of finally reading through Tom King's Up in the Sky Superman run. It's been on my list for a while. Just a very popular, maybe like the most popular modern Superman comic I've heard of, at least among Superman circles, right? People have been like talking about it and how much they love it. And honestly, after sitting through and reading the six issues, it's just a mini series. It only lasts six issues. I have to say that I was, I was going into it kind of expecting great things, and my expectations were blown out of the water. It was hands down and far and away my favorite, not only Superman story I've ever read, but probably comic book storyline I've ever read. It I think better than All Star Superman, better than the Action Comics Rebirth 52 runs. Just absolutely marvelous and like a real love letter to, I guess, the Superman fandom as a whole. And to the character himself, of course, as well. So I just wanted to make a video where I kind of talked about it, go through some of the different scenes, and kind of how each own issue and even like some of the individual panels kind of tell their own story and are so like deeply tied to the mythos of Superman, because obviously this character has been around for a really long time. I think we're um, in 2038 we will have reached our 100-year anniversary. So I think like around 86 years old character. And the writer of this, Tom King, like obviously definitely understands his Superman lore, and he gave like a lot of nods to a lot of like, just how to describe it, but like the aspects of the like character of Superman that have been so prevalent throughout the years and some of the most iconic moments. So let's get into it. We open up with Batman calling in Superman to tell him that there was a foster home that was attacked, presumably by aliens. Two of the children that were attacked ended up dead. One more was hospitalized, and one had been kidnapped. The girl who Superman goes to visit, the one survivor, says that the remaining girl, whose name is Alice, was taken away. Mentioning that Alice's favorite superhero is Superman, and that they used to always fight over who got to play with the Superman toy, um, which is a detail that does come up, of course. And she, tells Superman that she got kidnapped and taken into space. So Superman, obviously doesn't really know exactly where to like take this lead. He tries to contact Hal Jordan, and Hal Jordan says like, I'll have the Green Lanterns looking out for her, but the universe is a big place. So we flash forward a little bit, and this I think is like a really brilliantly like inserted scene. It's very small, but it brings up a good point of introducing, I guess, like the main philosophical point of the comic. And this scene is where Clark Kent goes to his I'm blanking on the name, but he goes to the the chief writer, like the publishing person at the Daily Planet, and says, there's this girl that was taken in Gotham. Sorry, Perry White, right? So yeah, he says, Perry, this girl was taken. I want to write an article about her. Try to get the word out, whatever it is. And Perry goes like, what are you talking about, Clark? Like, we're in Metropolis. This is like one of 17 disappearances in Gotham. Like, why would you ever care about it? And a little later on, this thought is kind of like echoed when Superman is talking to Batman, right? Like Superman fights a dinosaur, and he like then also goes to like stop a meteor from hitting Earth, and he says like, I don't know if I can leave Bruce. Like, there's so much that I have to do on this planet. Like, there's like, aliens that attack, asteroids I have to deal with. Like, how can I, as Superman, leave the planet just to save one little girl? And Batman like he responds with, like, because you have to, right? You're Superman. And this is a motif that's played a lot, right? You have to do it because you're Superman. He does it because he's Superman. And it really does like hammer home this idea that, Superman is not going to let just one person go. And there's this idea that comes up like, Superman's leaving the planet. Think about how many people inadvertently die, right? And it's not about the people that die when Superman leaves, it's about the people that he saves. And it goes into this like, Superman is still a little reluctant, but after having a conversation with his father as well, he decides that the best thing to do is leave. He stops by Lois and tells her as well, because he's a good boyfriend. He wouldn't just leave her, and he does like mention, a big part of his anxiety about leaving isn't just leaving, Metropolis, leaving Earth unprotected, but it's also leaving Lois, right? He can't be there for her when he's off in space. And so there's an idea here that is also like has been brought up, I think, before, which is like, what is the world without Superman, right? Superman is like this pillar that helps society. He is more than just a pillar. He's like literally like a physical guardian of Earth that prevents like a lot of negative things from happening. And I think this also gets kind of touched on in the digital comic run Superman's Day Off, right? Also a great series. And one of the very famous, I guess, like scenes that comes from this scene, meaning like a few different panels, right? Superman goes to Atlas, who is like, the mythological figure Atlas, who's like carrying all of the heavens, all of the world on his shoulders. And Atlas is like, he wants to attend his daughter's wedding, and he doesn't want to miss that, even though he's been trapped holding the heavens for literally all of eternity. Don't know when he would have had time to have a daughter, but same difference. He's holding all of the heavens, and he says like, Superman, take this like burden off my shoulders just for today. And Superman does, right? He lifts all the heavens, and already like a pretty impressive feat. But the important thing that's shown here is when Superman is gone, when he has to take his day off of work, like Metropolis and the world manage, right? Superman has left such like a lasting impact on the people. People like just try to do the right thing because they know that's what Superman would do. We have kids saving cats. We have the other superheroes like stepping in to help where they're needed, just to fill in for Superman's absence. So it's an idea that even though Superman isn't physically there, isn't like currently on the planet, his existence, his having been there, is already enough to kind of like keep the society going. And I mentioned it before, but the anime My Hero Academia really encapsulates this aspect of Superman's character very well with All Might, where he's more than just like a physical being that protects people, but he's also a symbol that helps people help themselves and help others, right? Just a beautiful part of his character. And this doesn't get explicitly mentioned in this comic run, right? This is in Superman's Day Off, not in Tom King's Up in the Sky. But I think this is a very important aspect of his character that I want to make sure is pointed out, because I think this is a big part of like, this debate of, is Superman leaving to save just one person okay? Like, will the world manage without him? And the answer is it always will, because it had him to begin with. But going back to the storyline, he finds an alien on some planet that, and it's going to be some science mumbo jumbo. Basically, there's some sort of like radiation or something that they can use to track her. But in order to be able to like track this radiation, whoever it is like needs an unrealistic amount of like computational power in their brain, something like that. Basically, the guy tells Superman, if you go through this process, your brain's going to get scrambled. You're not going to be able to like survive it. And Superman's like, okay, I have to try anyway. All right, he needs to save the girl. And so while he's, I guess, like battling his brainwave demons or whatever it is, we see like a bit of a flashback, or Superman's experiencing a flashback where there was like a child who was inspired by him, just like a normal 7-year-old kid, and like thinking he was Superman, he jumps off the roof of his house. And now I'm not actually 100% sure. I don't know that the implication here is that he's necessarily dead, but I'm pretty sure, based on like these panels and what's said a little later on, that the kid does pass away from his injuries, right? Just terribly sad. And of course, this really gets to Superman as well, where he's having a conversation with Diana after the event happens. He's like, I think I have to quit, because Superman, he knows that he saves a lot of people, but at the same time, like, just the weight of one person who like essentially killed themselves because of Superman's existence as like a symbol. He inspired the kid to, I guess, jump off the house, and he does feel responsible for it. And Diana points out that this is something that's going to happen, right? And it happened, and it's going to happen again. But it's more important that Superman is like necessary. People need him, and even if like people are going to get hurt from it, he's still like such an essential figure and like a pillar of the society that he can't just give up. Because but she also doesn't how do you say, like, sugarcoat it, right? She doesn't say like it's not your fault, like it would have happened either way. Like, she tells him like it happened and it'll happen again, but you have to suck it up and you still have to be Superman, right? And so then, as a part of the Superman's flashback, he also imagines talking to Alice, and he's very like we can really kind of feel his fear here, where she says essentially like, will you be able to save me? And he says, I don't know if I can, right? Obviously, Superman wouldn't say that to a person, right? He would say like, it's going to be okay, I'll save you. But in his heart of hearts here, he's very doubtful, right? He doesn't know that he's going to be able to save Alice. He doesn't even know where she is. So, it shows a bit of his fear and really his humanity, right? Superman isn't this like monolithic pillar of hope. He experiences fear just like everybody else. He's like a very human character. But anyway, after having his whole like I guess like episode with like this mental wave stuff or whatever it is, again, like explaining it isn't really going to be helpful. It's just sci-fi mumbo jumbo. But the point is, he eventually like tracks down like a general location of Alice, like at least where she was like a little while ago, and he's able to go and track her, like to continue tracking her down. Later on, we see him encounter an alien, and this alien's like a really good boxer and says, okay, Superman, if you want me to tell you where the girl is, then you have to like fight me mano a mano boxing, whatever it is, right? Just some silly like alien adventures. And, Superman is clearly outmatched in this fight, and he's not, the way it looks like he's not going to win, right? But then, around round 12, so after they've slugged it out for a while, the alien eventually realizes, like, even though I'm winning, even though, like, I'm, like, physically dominating Superman, like, Superman is just literally not gonna go down. Superman just has, like, that indomitable will. And that's, again, like, a derivative of his humanity, right? And I'll explain that a little later. Then later on, Superman, after getting beaten, he starts flying, goes unconscious in space, and an alien that finds him, it's, again, weird alien stuff, but he essentially like mind links with Superman and realizes, Superman is like just an amazing person. He has so many people that depend on him. He saved the Earth, the galaxy, the universe countless times. And essentially what happens is he trades his life force for Superman to save Superman's life, because he recognizes that Superman is such an important like pillar for the world and the universe as a whole. Even abandoning his own family, which, Superman does visit them to apologize because, essentially, in some sense, he did kill their father, right? Like a life for a life. And it's like a really touching and kind of sad scene, but again, it's just so like, it just really shows that, the writer loves and understands Superman, where even just an alien that encounters him is just immediately taken back by just how like amazing of a person Superman is and how important he seems, just by like seeing his memories and seeing like, what a pure soul he is, and realizing like, I can't let this guy die. He's so much like more than I am. And not to say that in like a rude way, right? But like, he just recognizes that even though he has a family that he loves and he wants to be there for them, he knows that Superman is just like this important pillar. And Superman doesn't run away from that responsibility. As soon as he's revived, he goes and he talks to the family to apologize to them and to tell them his last thoughts after as he like passed away. So then we fast forward and Superman is in like a DMV style line, where, and I think the implication here is that it's much longer. Like he's probably here for a few days, where he's just waiting to try to make like an interspatial, I guess, phone call to Lois Lane. And so as he's sitting here and he's like waiting, as sometimes happens when you don't have anything to do, his mind starts to wander and he starts to think of like all these like terrible situations that could be happening to Lois. Her getting hit by a bus, eaten by a shark, attacked by Zod. Joker is in there as well, burned at a stake. Like he's just really imagining all the different ways that Lois could be in trouble, and how he feels like so helpless to being able to help her. And eventually he does manage to get on the phone with her. And, it's just a really cute moment. And, she goes, oh, I hope you weren't worried about me, because I think she'd missed a phone call before. And Superman, he just says, why would I be worried? Like, I know you can take care of yourself. And he was worried, but he doesn't want to like put that on her. He's just such a wholesome guy. And you can just tell he's like, a great guy, a great boyfriend. He's just a perfect character. And honestly, this is just like a really touching scene. And, again, like, I think Lois and Superman is probably one of my favorite relationships in comics. And I don't normally like harp on this kind of stuff because honestly, I don't read comics for the relationships, but it's so nice and it's so perfect. And Lois is like such a grounding character for Superman. And in some ways she's like way stronger than he is, like his Clark Kent persona. He is like, ultimately like a very meek and humble guy. And I think her personality really contrasts that really well in like a really helpful, like in good way, where they kind of bounce off each other perfectly. That being said, small part of the story, but still nice that they included it. And then, so we go forward and we hear like a narration from Alice, who's the girl that got kidnapped, and she kind of describes the most recent, I guess, charity race between Superman and I think it's Wally West Flash. And so she mentions that, at some point in the race, Lex Luthor says, I'll donate $1 billion to the win, or if Superman manages to win this race. Because as it is, it looks like Superman's going to lose by like a pretty hard margin. And, Superman realizing this, because, he has super hearing, he heard it happen, realizes, like, he has to win because $1 billion to charity it's a lot of money. So he, he buckles down, he just runs faster, and he does eventually win the race. I think there's a little bit of discrepancy in the community about whether or not this actually means he's faster on foot than Flash. I think that people generally are of the opinion that Flash just let him win. And fair enough, right? Like, it doesn't matter. But the point is, Superman, and the reason that this comes up for Alice is because she's actually one of like the beneficiaries of Lex Luthor's donation, right? His donation was used to make the, I think, orphanage? Yeah, the orphanage that she lives at. And it's like a nice orphanage. She says, like, that's a big reason why she like knows who Superman is and appreciates him, is because, she literally is living in an orphanage that wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for Superman. So flashing forward, Superman is traveling through space and he gets hit by some sort of like mystical beam that manages to separate his Clark Kent persona from his Superman persona, right? And here we have what's probably my favorite scene in the whole comic book, because it's very reminiscent of a very famous clip from Kill Bill, where the main villain, maybe Kill Bill 2 actually, but the main villain is essentially like, talking about the distinction between Clark Kent and Superman. And he talks about how, in his interpretation, Superman is like the alien, the human, I guess like the person. He is like the personality of, Clark Kent Superman. And Clark Kent is his like, his alter ego, kind of his like his facade, right? He's first and foremost Superman, but he pretends to be a human. So he's like a strong, pillar type character that thinks he's better than humanity because he presents himself as such a meek human, even though he is like a strong and confident person. But I think that what a lot of people have come back on the scene when talking about it is that it does get that aspect wrong, where first and foremost, Superman is Clark Kent and is a human that grew up in Kansas with like, loving parents. He is at his core like a meek, not weak, but like a meek and scared person, right? He's a human being like just the rest of us. And his Superman persona is more so like him putting on the costume and putting on a brave face for other people. Because we've seen countless times, and even in this comic run, that Superman is not always confident in himself, right? He sometimes has that fear that like, things aren't going to go well, that he's not going to be able to save everyone. And that is something that he lives with. That's not something that he fakes as a human being. That's something that he experiences. So it really goes to show, he is a human being first and foremost, and his Superman persona is just that. It's a persona. It's not really who he is. And so this Superman persona, it kind of takes like, how do you say, like a Kryptonian persona, I guess, where it's like this, I'm better than everybody else, and therefore it's my responsibility to help people. But like not in a human way, but in like more so a like I'm a higher being than these human beings type way, right? And so he says like, I can't focus on saving one little girl. I'm going back to Earth where I'm needed. And Clark Kent goes like, if that's what you think, then just leave, right? And so the Superman persona leaves, and he comes back a few minutes later. And he's like, I don't know what it is, but I realize I can't leave. I feel like I need you, but I don't understand exactly why. And Clark Kent points out, like, the reason you need me is the same reason I need you, is because I give you strength, right? So obviously his Kryptonian heritage is what gives Superman his physical strength, but what gives him his like indomitable will, his and just like that ability to keep moving forward even when the odds are stacked against him is his human persona. Again, not explicitly said, but this is more or less how I interpret this scene. I think it's like pretty reasonable given like, everything we know about Superman as a character. His human persona is what makes him Superman, not his super strength, his super speed, or any of his superpowers. So eventually they join up again and they fly into space. And the Superman persona says something to the effect of, hope is so silly. It just motivates men to do what they can't. And Clark Kent responds with, that's not a bad thing at all. Right. And I think, it's a pretty important point, right? Superman is a symbol of hope, and it's very easy to be hopeful when you know that there's a chance that things are going to be okay. But like the real strength of Superman comes in hoping when like everything is like guaranteed to go wrong, right? Like when there's no hope, when there's this 7-year-old lost somewhere in like the vastness of space, and you just have no idea how to find her. Superman still like finds a way, and that's a big part of his character is hope when hope isn't practical, I guess is how I would describe it. So later on, Superman gets to Darkseid, and Darkseid says, "Okay, I know where the girl is, but if you want to know, if you want to get that information from me, we have to make a deal." And Superman says, "Okay, well, what's your deal?" Darkseid essentially says, "You have to kill one innocent person." Yeah, he wants to like I guess sully Superman in some way where he says you have to kill somebody, and then I'll give you the location of the girl so you can save her. So Superman finds this like sick alien who is suffering from an incurable disease and essentially wants to die, right? But he doesn't have like the heart to take his own life, so he asks Superman like, "Can you take this knife and can you kill me, please?" Right? And Superman, well, we'll get to this a little later, but Superman has a dialogue with him, and he says like how regrettable it is the idea that he would have to like take another life, even if it's somebody who's begging to be killed. Like it's just not something Superman does. So Superman takes the knife, and we cut out. And he eventually goes back to Darkseid, and Darkseid says, "Okay, did you do it?" And Superman responds with, "I did." And Darkseid says, "I don't believe you." To which Superman responds, "Well, there's two situations here, Darkseid. Either I killed the guy, or you just made me go back on my word. And either way, you win, right?" So Darkseid is pretty pleased with that, and he says, "Okay, here's the location of the girl." So Superman goes to, save her, and he gets captured by the same alien that captures her, and it tries restraining him, and at the same time, it's actually conducting an attack on Earth. So all the superheroes on Earth are struggling to fight against these robots that it's attacking with, and Superman just keeps persevering, says, "I will not give up," as Superman does, and eventually he wins, which also allows the heroes on Earth to survive as well, because they were getting clearly overpowered by the robots, and once Superman was able to take down the Brain, he's also inadvertently able to save Earth. And now this is the one part of the comic that I think I don't love, where it's this idea that if Superman didn't go to this planet to stop like I guess like the Brain of the robot invasion, then Earth would have been doomed. So he just happened to be in the right place at the right time. I think narratively it would have made more sense if the heroes on Earth were just able to deal with their own invasion separately, and this was like its own story. But it's fair enough, and it's like nice, and there's really nothing wrong with it. It's just how it goes. So eventually Superman finds the girl, and he says in Superman fashion, like you can imagine like a character like Batman in this situation really wouldn't know what to say, right? He's a nice guy, don't get me wrong, but he's not good at comforting children. But Superman says, it's going to be a bit of a journey, but I'm going to be here with you. I'm going to make sure you get home safe. And in a way to engage, like if you've ever been around a 7-year-old child, that like their minds are like, I guess like a perfect like dome of imagination where they like if you got them talking, they could talk for hours nonstop. So that's what Superman does. He says, if you have any questions, just talk to me as we go, and I'll answer every question you have. Right? So as they're flying, it's exactly what happens, right? She just is constantly asking him questions, and like without hesitating, without being annoyed, Superman answers every one of them. And you can tell he's doing it just to make her comfortable, right? She asks him questions about the origins of his superpowers and such. And eventually, like along the way, he also stops, and we see the alien that Superman like supposedly was supposed to kill. And it turns out Superman took his incurable disease and found a cure for it, because that's just the kind of person Superman is, right? It goes back to the idea that when hope is like by definition illogical and there's no reason for it, if something's incurable, undoable, Superman always finds a way, because there's always another way. That's like a big part of his character. And it's just it's just a beautiful scene to see this man thanking Superman for his life, because he was somebody who had given up on life too. He was miserable. His disease, to his like knowledge, was incurable, and he was just so like done with it. But Superman not only gave him hope, but like gave him a disease, which is just beautiful small detail that they did. They didn't have to, but they did. And then, like, as she's asking him more questions, she asks him, like, who would win between you and Batman? And Superman says, oh, Batman would definitely win. And she says, why? He says, because I would let him. And when she, like, asks him why he would do that, he just says because he doesn't care about winning. And, like, Superman, like, like, winning against a friend means nothing to Superman. He's not, like, some egotist that thinks, like, oh, I need to win this fight. It'll, like, prove something about me. Like, he doesn't care about winning fights with his friends, right? He's just like such a wholesome person. And going on, they explore more of the world. He takes her to the alien planets to meet aliens, try the food there, and he even stops for like a night just so she can get rest because like obviously she can sleep in his arms as he's flying, but he wants her to have like a comfortable night's sleep because she's a child and she went through so much. And it's just such a good attention to detail. Superman just cares so much about every person that he encounters. It's just absolutely mind-boggling. So going on, she asks some more questions about the different superheroes, and you can just tell Superman is just like he loves the other heroes as well. He's so respectful to them, and it shows how much he like also appreciates the other heroes. It's just truly beautiful. And eventually she goes on and asks him, like, a very standard questions, like, have you ever been scared, Superman? Like, what's the most you've ever been scared? And Superman describes, times that he was scared. And he, like, fully admits that he is not, like, some brave, infallible person, right? He is a human being just like the rest of us. And so finally he stops with her and she delivers the last line, which is, I wanted to ask you why you would go to space just to save one person, just to save me. But the answer to that is really obvious. It's just because you're Superman. And again, it's a motif that gets played a lot, that you're Superman as a justification for pretty much everything. But, like, it's just true. It's just how it is. Superman would undeniably drop everything on Earth to go save just one person because she believed in him, right? And she was. The whole time she was, like, out there in space, like, alone and scared, she would just clutch her Superman doll and she would have hope that, he was coming to save her, and eventually he did. And just, it's a big part of his character, and, like, kudos to Tom King. I think this is maybe the single greatest love letter to Superman I've ever seen in, like, media. It really understands every, like, aspect of his character, which, to some extent it's simple, but at the same time it's also, like, very multifaceted, very complex. And while he's doing this and exploring Superman's, like, philosophy and why he's such a great superhero, he also goes on to, like, explore fun parts of the Superman mythos. We got the Batman versus Superman fight. We got the Flash versus Superman race. And it's just truly, like, you can tell that there was a lot of love put into this comic, and I have a lot of appreciation for it for that reason. It really just went on to show Superman not just as a superhero, not just as, like, something that humanity needs, but as a symbol of hope, and the way he's able to inspire other people, and how even though there's this idea that, like, if Superman's taking time to take a cat out of a tree, or spending a whole day to, like, calm down a woman, like, on a ledge of a building, then how many people is he allowing to die while he does that? And it tackles this philosophical question in a very, like, tasteful and really, like, I guess almost, like, empowering way, where it's just because he's Superman, right? It's something he has to do, and even when he does leave the Earth, or, like, have to go do something else elsewhere, he can trust that the people of Metropolis, the people of the Earth, can function without him, right? He's been able to inspire people to be better. And, like, there's numerous superheroes in the Superman mythos, Steel, Supergirl, who are all, like, derivatives of Superman, who were inspired to do good by him. And, when he leaves, he can trust the world to be in their care for just a little bit. And it's just, absolutely beautiful story. To anyone who hasn't read it, I would recommend picking it up. I think every single panel, every single part, every issue is its own story, and it kind of, like, encapsulates its own different part of the Superman mythos. This comic book really did feel like the product of, like, 80 plus years of Superman, right? And you can just tell that there was so much love put into this work, and it will go down probably as my all-time favorite comic book. Aside from that, I just wanted to make a video about it because, it was so great, and I just wanted to share how much I loved it. That's all I have for this. Thank you.